Welcome to part 30 of our series on building a Zelda-like game in Phaser 3. In this video, we'll extend our transition system to support seamless level changes. We'll ensure that moving from one level to another feels smooth while preserving important game state information. If you're new here, this is part of a full series where we create a Zelda-inspired game from scratch. Check out the playlist link in the description to start from the beginning. Alright, let's jump in and build our level transition system. Now that we have our logic in place for allowing our player to transition between our various rooms in our dungeon, next we'll focus on our level transitions. For this, once our player's body overlaps with our door trigger for the front of our dungeon, we're going to see if our door object has a target level defined. If it does, we're going to restart our phaser scene, we're going to load in the data for that level, and then transition our player to that starting position. To start adding these changes, let's go into our game scene. We'll go into our handle room transition method. After we get a reference to our door game object, we want to check our target level property on our door, and if it's one of our levels, then we want to restart our scene. And so to do this, let's do if, and we'll say if our door, our target level, it doesn't equal empty string, then we want to do the same logic that we did in our preload scene, where we build out our level data object, and then we call scene.start and pass that to our scene. So let's copy that logic, come back to our game scene, we'll paste that in, but now for our properties, for our level, this is going to be our door and then our target level. Now for our room ID, we'll do our door and we'll do our target room ID, and now we'll do our door and our target, and then our target door ID. So now to fix our issue with our target level, currently we're expecting one of our level names as our string, but the data we're getting from tiled just parses our target level as a string. So we're going to add a utility function to make sure our target level property is actually one of our level names. To do that, let's jump over to our utils file. Let's copy our function for isDirection. And now we're going to do the same thing for making sure our string is one of our level names. So for our function name, we're going to do is level name. For our argument, we're just going to call this level name. And now for our return type, we'll say our level name is our level name type. Now we just want to check on the correct object. So we'll have level name. We'll pass in our level name for our property, and you just want to make sure it's not undefined. Now back in our game scene, we're going to replace this logic with our utility function. So we'll do is level name, and then we'll pass our door and our target level as our argument. So before we can test our level transition, we need to address a bug that was included as part of the original project template. In the original project template, we included our two JSON files, one for our dungeon and one for our world, which is our JSON files we exported out from tiled. Now in our dungeon_1 JSON file, we have one of our target properties called target level where we set our value to be world. Now this is our door object where we want to transition to our world scene. When we created our levels in tiled, we expected these values to all be capitalized. So in the original version of the project template, this value is all lowercase. This has been fixed in the project repo, so there's a possibility you don't need to fix this here. So we need to change this string to be all capitalized, and the reason for that is back in our game scene, when we do our check for isLevelName, we're expecting that property to exist on our object. Since our string is all lowercase, this is going to cause an issue where we won't be able to find our level name. So as an example, if I turn this back to lowercase, and if we have our player try to leave our dungeon, what will happen is we're going to have this weird teleporting effect where our player is going to come back up to the top of our map. And so if we change this to all be uppercase, and we refresh our browser, if we have our player leave our dungeon, our level should now transition to our world scene like we expect. Besides fixing our code in our JSON file, we're also going to add some code to our game scene to handle this case in case it happens again. Now in our code, let's do const. We're going to make a new variable and call this modified level name. We're going to set that equal to our door, our target level. Now we're just going to call to uppercase. And now we just need to pass our variable to our isLevelName check. And then we'll pass it down here for our level data as well. Alright, if we want to test, let's come back to our browser. Let's have our player navigate down to our dungeon entrance. Alright, and as soon as our player's body overlaps with our door trigger, we'll see our scene restarts, and now we loaded in our assets that are tied to our world level. Alright, so one thing we'll need to fix is after our scene starts, we need to update our player's starting position. We'll need to base this on the target room and the target door ID that our player just entered through. To update our player's starting position, let's go to our setUpPlayer method. So now to calculate our player's position, we need to get a reference to our door that our player just exited through, or when we first launch our game, where our player is starting at. To do that, let's make a new variable, do const. We're going to do starting door. We're going to set that equal to this. We'll do our objects by room ID. Now we're going to use our level data. We want to use our room that our player is currently in. Now we'll reference our door map. Now we'll do this, our level data, and now our door ID. Once we have our starting door object, we can now calculate our player's starting position based on that door's X and Y values. For that, let's make a new object. We'll do const. We're going to call this player start position. Set that equal to an object. Now for X, we'll do our starting door X value, and we'll do plus. We want to do our starting door, our door transition zone. We want to grab our width. We want to divide that by 2. Now for our Y value, we'll do our starting door Y. And we want to decrement our starting door, our door transition zone, and we'll divide that by 2. So now that we have our initial properties, we want to check the direction of our door and then update our X and Y values accordingly. So similar to what we did when we did our room transition, where we update our player's X and Y values based on the door and the direction, that's what we'll do here. So let's do a switch statement, and we'll do our starting door. Let's do our direction. Now we'll have our various cases. We'll have case, we'll have our direction up. And so when our door is facing up, we want to increase our Y value. So we'll do our player start position, our Y value. We want to increment it, and we'll do 40. Then we'll do break. Now let's copy those lines of code. We'll do our other cases. So after up, we're going to have down, and now we'll decrement by 40. Then we'll have left and then right. And so for our left and right, we want to modify our X property. When we go left, we want to decrement, and we go right, we want to increment our X value. Finally, we'll add in our exhaustive guard. So let's do our starting door, and we'll do our direction. Oh, and then up here, so after our door transition zone, we want to grab our height. And then this should be a default. So now that we have our player start position, we can update our positioning down here to use those values. So for our object, we'll have our X will be equal to our player start position.x. We'll have our Y, we'll set that equal to our player start position, and then our Y value. All right, so if we save, and when our browser refreshes, we'll see our player starts right next to the door that's specified in our level data from our preload scene. So as an example, if we jump over to our preload scene, let's update our scene data. So let's go to room 2. And now when our browser refreshes, we'll see now our camera is now focused on our second room and our player is next to that door. Now if we update our door ID to be door ID 2, our player is going to spawn down by our second door. So now what we should be able to do is if we change our room ID to any of the IDs of our rooms in our dungeon, we should be able to test our logic for our various doors and our room combinations. Oh, so it looks like we have an issue tied to our X position. Let's come back to our code in our game scene. Oh, so when we're going to our direction left, we actually want to increment our X value, and we're going right, we want to decrement our X value. So now, if we come back to our preload scene, let's test our various combinations. So let's do our room ID 3, we'll do door 1. Now if we do door 2, we'll see our player spawns next to our door, and now they're right next to where they just exited from. And so now if we do room 4, we should see our player spawns in the correct location. Alright, so with these changes, what we should now be able to do is if we update our level name, we do our world scene, now our player should spawn outside the entrance to our dungeon. So now if we revert that back to our dungeon level, let's start off in room ID 3, and we'll update our door ID to be 3. Alright, so if we save our changes, if we have our player leave our dungeon, we should now spawn in our world level, and now if our player comes back to our door, oh, looks like we have an issue. Let's jump over to our game scene. Yes, so after we restart our scene, we want to have a return statement so we don't run the rest of our code. Alright, so if we save our changes, let's have our player go through our door, we go to our world level, and now if we have our player try to come back into our dungeon, we now have our player appear in the correct room and at the correct door. Nice. That's it for this part of the series. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you're following along, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. If you have any questions or want to share your progress, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Alright, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.